In 2048, with the development of technological capabilities, the crime rate rose sharply. Law enforcement agencies could no longer cope with the new types of crime, so combat androids were called in to assist, becoming partners to detectives. One day, police officers John Kennex and Martin Pelham fall into an ambush during a raid. Pelham is fatally wounded. John tries to carry his partner to cover, but the MX model android assigned to them refuses to help, justifying it by saying he must prioritize saving those who still have a chance of survival. While John struggles to drag Pelham alone, he gets injured and loses his right leg. John remains in a coma for 17 months, and once he regains consciousness, he decides to recover his lost memories, though the doctor overseeing the procedure expresses concern for his health. During the process, John remembers his former girlfriend Anna, which seems rather strange. The next day, John's superior, Captain Sandro Maldonado, insists he return to duty. John agrees, although he hasn't fully adapted to his new prosthetic leg. When he shows up at the precinct, he is assigned an MX android, though John adamantly refuses to work with a robot. However, it is now mandatory. He is informed that one of the criminals who robbed a van earlier today has been apprehended and is being transported to the station. Meanwhile, John and MX 785 arrive at the crime scene. 785 reports that programmable DNA has been stolen from a scientific laboratory's truck. This DNA can be used to grow living tissue, including human organs. 785 annoys John so much that he simply pushes the android out of the car. Later, engineer Rudy Lom suggests that John work with a drone model android, Dorian, who was deactivated for unknown reasons 4 years ago. Unlike the MX units, DRNs were created with emotional programming and feel emotions similarly to humans. Rudy allows John to personally reactivate Dorian, and together they head back to the precinct. Meanwhile, Detective Vogel is attacked by a gang. His MX partner is shot, but the camera in his eye manages to capture the incident. John reviews the footage. After an interrogation, a suspect named Trevor reveals an address where the gang is holding Vogel. John and Dorian set off to track him down. Trevor is escorted to a restroom where he removes a transmitting device from his stomach and attaches it to a toilet tank. Arriving at the given address, John and Dorian discover a bomb with a timer. Dorian analyzes the situation and identifies it as a trap. The partners find Vogel locked inside a bulletproof glass cube. John tries to warn the officers escorting Trevor, but they have already walked into an ambush. At that moment, the bomb's timer hits 0, releasing a deadly gas into the cube and killing Vogel. It becomes clear that the entire scheme was carefully pre-planned. A sample of Vogel's skin is sent to Rudy for analysis. Meanwhile, Dorian takes a blood sample from the body and injects it into himself to download information. John instructs the team to investigate Vogel's connections with organizations involved in DNA research. Meanwhile, Dorian discovers that a file from Vogel's case has gone missing. At the same time, Rudy reports that the chemical that killed Vogel destroyed his police-grade biological protection. John visits his doctor again to try to recover more memories from 2 years ago. This time, he clearly sees the face of the person who threw a grenade at him. It was Anna. John proposes using Dorian's unique system to extract the deleted files from Vogel's robot memory. Dorian agrees. They find Vogel's MX unit and uncover a plot by the criminals to retrieve evidence from the precinct. They warn Sandra about the impending attack. Meanwhile, the criminals activate the device Trevor left in the restroom. All electronics, including the MX androids, shut down. The older generation of androids, to which Dorian belongs, proves immune to the device's effects. Spotting the intruders, the police opened fire, but most of the criminals managed to escape after spraying police officers with a gas similar to the one that killed Vogel. Dorian captures one of the attackers. However, the criminal grabs Detective Valerie and threatens her with a gas canister. John manages to save Valerie, and the criminal is taken into custody. The police search the evidence warehouse, trying to figure out what exactly the criminals were looking for, but they have no concrete leads. Later, Rudy revives the MX androids that were damaged during the attack. Meanwhile, John allows Dorian to address him by his first name. The next day in a hotel room, a man named Sebastian Jones is spending time with a red-haired girl in lingerie. However, instead of taking advantage of her services, he begins to examine her. He doesn't know that a man in a suit is watching them through a camera. Jones's behavior catches the observer's attention, and he calls for backup. Soon, 2 young men arrive at the hotel. They spray a substance from aerosol cans onto their faces, which interferes with their images on surveillance cameras. Jones cuts a lock of the girl's hair, and at that moment, the men burst into the room and shoot him in the chest. One of them takes the girl away, while the other activates and throws a metallic sphere into the room, which explodes, spreading a fluorescent blue substance everywhere. John and Dorian arrive at the crime scene and discover that no biological material can be collected because the criminals detonated a DNA bomb, erasing all traces. Zooming in on the girl's bright green eye, Dorian realizes that she is an android. At the precinct, the police find out that Jones headed a corporation that produced robots designed for intimate activities. However, he had recently declared bankruptcy, and his assets, including a warehouse, had been seized. The detectives go to the warehouse and find several deactivated bots, along with a court summons addressed to Jones. Meanwhile, Valerie reports that DNA belonging to a girl named Nicole Bloomquist, kidnapped 3 weeks ago from a parking lot, was found at the crime scene. However, the red-haired girl who left the trace was actually a bot. Meanwhile, at a parking lot, a mother leaves her child in the car to throw away some trash. Suddenly, men jump out of a vehicle, grab her, and drive off in an unknown direction, leaving the frightened boy behind. Later, the boy is brought to the precinct. John questions him and gives him a toy giraffe. The boy recounts everything he saw and names the color of the kidnapper's car. By checking surveillance footage, the police identify the car's make. Meanwhile, Valerie finds information about Jones's creditor who took over his case. The police head to his dealership. The man, Sho, claims that he and Jones parted ways because Jones wanted to create a new type of androids, which was too expensive. Moreover, their main client had suddenly pulled out, claiming to have found someone better. Sho firmly states that implanting human DNA into an intimate bot is illegal. The police head to a club that caters to former clients of the dealership and begin testing all the bots for human DNA. The men, observers who had earlier appeared in the footage of the parking lot kidnapping, confront the police, insisting that their bots are regularly checked and that no laws have been broken. They claim not to know the red-haired girl, a bot, but Dorian immediately reads their deceit. Meanwhile, Valerie reports that the silver sedan used by the kidnappers had been parked near a bridge for some time. The partners drive there and find the remains of the hotel girl bot, stripped of her skin. Rudy examines the remains and concludes that the criminals are using the skin of real women to manufacture intimate machines indistinguishable from living humans. It seems that Jones found out about this and paid for it with his life. However, to confirm the result, Rudy needs a living bot with human DNA. At the same time, the police stop the sedan and find a girl bot named Vanessa inside, embedded with human DNA. Meanwhile, the kidnapped women are being transported to a laboratory where they are prepared for the skin removal procedure. The detectives interrogate Vanessa, and she names the owner of the club. But when the police arrive there, they find no laboratory inside. The owners of the club have just arrived at the real laboratory and are ordering the doctors to abandon their operations and destroy the women. Dorian consults Rudy, reminding him that the intimate bots use the same activation plates as he does. Using this information, Rudy locates the place where Vanessa was activated. The police manage to arrive before the laboratory's destruction and save several women. After the operation, Sandra thanks them and informs them that the intimate bots with human DNA must be destroyed. Dorian asks for permission to be present during the procedure. Vanessa is deactivated. The next day, terrorists seize one of the city's buildings. John and Dorian rush to the scene, and while evacuating civilians, they ascend the stairs. Meanwhile, the leader of the terrorist group gathers the hostages and orders the server room to be destroyed, while Sandra commands to jam all communications in the surrounding area. As a result, all incoming calls to the building are automatically rerouted to Dorian's system. Through this, he connects with a young woman hiding in a room with other hostages. She informs him that the bandits have just killed one of the hostages and thrown the body out of a window to show the police they mean business. The gang leader contacts Sandra and demands a nuclear detonator. Experts manage to identify him as Lucas Vincent from the Sacred Army of Rebirth. Meanwhile, Rudy offers to assemble a fake nuclear detonator on their own. John and Dorian engage in a firefight with the terrorists. They stalk each other through the building until the detectives finally kill one of the enemies. It is then that they discover a face projection device that disguises the criminals as known terrorists. However, Dorian's processor, damaged during the fight, begins to malfunction. John has to perform a makeshift repair by patching the hole with chewing gum. At that moment, Rudy brings the completed fake detonator, which is sent to the terrorists via drone. Upon receiving it, Lucas orders his team to move forward. John realizes that the terrorists' true goal was to distract the police while they stole millions of dollars worth of palladium ore from a nearby bank. They are now preparing to leave, planning to set off a bomb and kill the hostages before escaping. Dorian climbs up the elevator cables and reaches the hall with the hostages through the ventilation system. He manages to shoot several terrorists but is captured by Lucas. Dorian's life is saved when John arrives, using the face projection device to disguise himself. John neutralizes the criminals and alerts the police about the real heist. Afterward, the detectives are thanked by the people they rescued. Sometime later, two men arrive at an underground lab where they were scheduled to meet a criminal known as Bishop, who is searching for a cook to manufacture illegal substances. However, both men are killed when Bishop suspects they are undercover cops. The next day, John and Dorian arrived at the crime scene. John had known one of the victims, Cooper, and refuses to believe he would cut a deal with criminals, despite Captain Alexio Barres insisting otherwise. Barres also informed Sandra that Cooper had been investigating the emergence of a new substance called cassin. Cooper's wife shares that the night before his death, her husband had visited a lakeside cabin inherited from his father. John and Dorian head to the lake, but find the cabin doors open and the inside ransacked. Recalling the wife's mention of a non-functioning fireplace, John searches it and finds a device recording transmissions from Cooper's surveillance work. The detectives propose sending Rudy undercover into Bishop's organization as the new cook. Surprisingly, Rudy agrees. Valerie creates a fake dossier for the scientist and uploads it into the network. Meanwhile, John and Dorian track down a small-time dealer and persuade him to arrange a meeting between Bishop and the new cook. Back at the precinct, John's colleagues put Rudy through a grueling examination to ensure he matches his cover story. At the end of the test, Rudy manufactures a batch of cassin, nearly blowing up the lab in the process. Nonetheless, they deem him ready for the operation. After administering a tracking solution, they escort him to the building where Bishop arranged the meeting. However, upon hearing Rudy's hesitant responses, Dorian decides to follow him under the pretense that Rudy forgot his glasses. Rudy claims Dorian is his personal robot and proceeds to manufacture a batch of cassin. Bishop praises Rudy for his craftsmanship, but forces him to drink a solution that disables the tracking device. The police immediately move to raid the building, but Rudy is no longer inside. Valerie finds traces of the solution that disabled their surveillance and suspects that Bishop must have a police insider. By deduction, Sandra concludes that Bishop is in fact Captain Barres. Barres enters the laboratory to meet with Rudy. At that moment, Sandra calls him. While she informs him about the progress of the investigation, the police track his location and head there. Realizing he is suspected, Rudy yanks out a steam pipe, injures his arm, and escapes. Bishop's henchman follows the trail of blood just as the police arrive. A shootout ensues. Dorian finds Rudy, but he is attacked by the dealer's android. The two robots fight, but Dorian wins. Meanwhile, John catches Barres and neutralizes him for corruption and for the murder of his friend. Later, Sandra is summoned to a court session regarding the case of Ethan Avery, accused of murdering Dr. Fuller, with witnesses to the crime. Two girls who were present in the parking lot during the incident are brought in. Maya picks up a scarf belonging to Haley's grandmother and suddenly states that the old woman doesn't want her to touch it. Haley is stunned. Her grandmother had passed away. Maya confesses that she is a psychic and can communicate with the dead. At that moment, Haley is called in to testify while Maya steps into the restroom. As soon as Haley appears on screen, someone enters the room and kills both her and the security guard. Hearing the gunshots, Maya escapes through a window. John and Dorian are assigned to ensure the safety of the remaining witness. They track Maya down in the woods. Meanwhile, Ethan laughs at Sandra, pointing out that she no longer has any evidence against him. At the precinct, Maya insists that after a surgery to activate her mental abilities, she can hear the voices of the dead. She says that Haley's spirit told her that Ethan Avery was the murderer. At that moment, Rudy arrives with the results of a voice analysis, confirming that the killer was indeed Ethan Avery. The detectives suspect the existence of a clone. Valerie reminds them that the murdered Dr. Fuller had specialized in cloning before the practice was outlawed. Meanwhile, the detectives learn that Maya has left the precinct. They catch up to her and force her into the car. Suddenly, they are ambushed by armed men. John kills one of the attackers, who looks exactly like Ethan Avery. The wounded Maya is taken to the hospital while John reports the existence of the clone. Maya tells Dorian about losing her parents. She had the surgery to be able to talk to them again, but the house burned down and no belongings survived, leaving her with no connection to them. Meanwhile, Valerie visits Dr. Fuller's house and finds evidence of cloning. Her android manages to transmit the data back to the precinct before Valerie is captured by Ethan's clones. Later, the clones contact John and demand to exchange Valerie for Ethan. Sandra sets out with Ethan and, contacting the clones, promises to bring their original. In reality, she leads Ethan into a hallway where Rudy has installed equipment that projects holograms to the meeting location. The groups begin to converge when the hologram glitches. Valerie shoves the clones aside and runs toward the police. A gunfight breaks out. The clones attempt to flee, but Dorian chases them down and flips their car, which explodes. Ethan is returned to his cell. Later, Maya testifies, and Ethan Avery is sentenced to prison. Dorian thanks Maya and gives her a box containing her parents' belongings, which were recovered as evidence from the arson case. Maya picks up a door handle from the box and greets her loved ones. At a hospital, a man bursts in, claiming that someone is trying to kill him by inducing a heart attack. While the doctors attempt to calm him down, he dies of a heart attack. John and Dorian respond to the suspicious death, learning that the deceased had a very expensive artificial heart despite not being listed on any transplant registries. John reports the incident to Sandra, while Rudy discovers a strange microchip inside the heart. The detectives visit the foundation responsible for organ transplants. The director confirms that the heart belonged to them, but says she doesn't know how the man obtained it. She finds a record of the heart's original owner, a woman who died 2 years ago. The detectives head to the crematorium, where worker Henry admits to selling hearts and other organs. The buyer, a man named Oscar. At that moment, Valerie reports that the deceased had been transferring money to a specific account every month. Meanwhile, Rudy confirms that the heart contained a timer that had to be reset every 30 days. It becomes clear the man was paying to keep his heart functioning, which is why he knew the exact time of his death. At the police's request, Henry calls Oscar. Oscar soon arrives. Following him, the police discover an underground clinic where similar operations are actively being performed. Meanwhile, Henry receives a call from a woman ordering him to destroy all the timers and disappear. The arrested surgeon provides the woman's name, though it is clearly fake. Soon after, people across the city with artificial hearts begin to die. It turns out they were all former clients of the Transplant Foundation who had been denied official procedures. In every case, the same administrator was involved. The detectives return to the crematorium, where they catch Henry just as he is about to burn the body of the woman who organized the profitable business. The foundation's staff commit to replacing all the secondhand hearts. The next day, the police department faces electrical problems, leaving Dorian unable to recharge. Meanwhile, a masked man bursts into the car of a bank employee named Ramon and knocks him out. When Ramon regains consciousness, he finds a device with a timer strapped to his neck. A voice through a transmitter orders him to follow instructions, while a live broadcast of the incident starts online. Ramon is forced to drive to the bank and, under threat of violence, forces a colleague to transfer money to a designated account. The detectives respond to the call and stop Ramon's car, but they realize they won't have time to defuse the bomb. They shield Ramon with a protective dome, where he dies when the bomb detonates. The psychopathic killer's viewers express delight over the brutal execution. The police learn that Ramon was responsible for loan approvals and start compiling a file on those he rejected. Meanwhile, Valerie discovers footage of the murder posted on the dark web. At the same time, Rudy locates the address where Ramon had been ordered to deliver the money. The police head there and find a computer displaying the name of the next victim, a florist named Jenny. Having received a flower delivery order, Jenny heads to the location with a bouquet of roses, only to find herself in the same trap as Ramon. Video of her predicament is soon broadcast online. The girl follows the madman's orders until the detectives track her down. Dorian starts working on disarming the bomb. Jenny reveals that the perpetrator is a man she rejected, Simon, and provides a description. The detectives manage to save Jenny at the last possible moment, sending Dorian into a euphoric state while the killer flies into a rage. The police find Simon's profile on a dating site and discover he had been one of Ramon's clients. Further investigation reveals that Simon once tried to become a police officer, but was expelled from the academy. This suggests his next target might be his former sergeant. The detectives soon locate Simon's trailer. Upon arrival, they find it rigged with explosives. The trailer detonates. While searching the area, John spots a man in a police uniform. As John approaches, he is sprayed in the face with gas. John regains consciousness on a park bench with a bomb collar around his neck. The killer contacts him, instructing him to free himself using the tools provided. Through the live broadcast, Valerie identifies John's location. The police move out. Surveying the plaza, Dorian deduces that the killer is likely positioned at the clock tower. However, the perpetrator warns that if snipers fire and he drops the detonator, the bomb will go off. Dorian climbs the clock tower to disable the killer with an electric charge that will prevent him from releasing the device. But Dorian's battery is down to only 15%. He manages to succeed at the last second. When John's bomb deactivates, Dorian collapses beside the immobilized Simon. That evening, John drives Dorian to Rudy, who offers Dorian a place to live in his laboratory. One day, a young man bursts onto a train station platform where he is stopped by the police. He pleads for help, and a bullet shatters the glass ceiling, killing him instantly. Despite the discovery of 3 distinct bullet marks, there was only 1 bullet fired. Dorian suspects a ricochet. Later, he finds the victim's girlfriend, Kira Larson, who worked with Anton. The detectives head to her location, receiving confirmation en route from Rudy that the bullet had indeed been guided by a targeting system. They break the bad news to Kira. The only unusual thing she remembers is a new face in Anton's circle, a recruiter named Natalie. Meanwhile, Dorian studies Anton's work and realizes that the company produced software designed to track real-time queries to deliver personalized ads. Anton exploited a flaw in the software to turn gadgets into an accurate targeting system for bullets. However, according to Interpol data, this technology was stolen from a Ukrainian weapons depot. It seems Anton sold his software to arms dealers who then used it to carry out killings. At that very moment, the arms dealers present the technology to a potential buyer who demands a live demonstration of the bullet. Natalie suggests eliminating Kira. Valerie volunteers to study Anton's financial records while Dorian tries to locate Natalie. Meanwhile, the arms dealers launch one of their guided bullets at Kira. Dorian detects network activity and notices that the surveillance cameras are focusing. He shields Kira, taking a bullet to the stomach himself. Kira and her daughter are moved to an underground bunker for their protection. Blaming Anton, Kira decides she wants to erase her memory to convince the arms dealer she poses no threat. Meanwhile, Valerie finds Anton's safety deposit box containing scraps of paper with numbers and a video where Kira and her daughter are threatened unless Anton hands over the schematics. Unaware of this, Kira arrives at a memory erasure clinic, hoping the arms dealers will leave her alone when she forgets everything. The detectives find her before the arms dealers do, but before they can escort Kira out, Natalie and her partner arrive. John and Dorian engage in a fight with the attackers and manage to disable them. At the precinct, they show Kira the blackmail video and explain that Anton sold his software to protect her and her child. Kira finally understands who her friend really was. The following evening, a robber kills a woman. When police gun him down, they discover he was a modified service bot. His body is taken to the evidence storage. Sometime later, the bot reactivates, locates, and reassembles the female android head stored separately and steals weapons. He replaces his own head with the woman's, kills a police officer, and escapes. The next morning, the team reviews surveillance footage, and Sandra recognizes the head of the XRN android that had been stored in evidence. John suggests that this was exactly what the criminals were after. Later, John tells Dorian that shortly after the DRN line of androids was deployed to the police force, they began malfunctioning. Their manufacturer, LumaCorp, went bankrupt. The owner, in an effort to recover losses, created a new machine and showcased it before many influential people. However, the demonstration went catastrophically wrong. XRN killed 26 police officers and countless androids before being taken down after 3 days. Only her head remained, stored among the evidence. Meanwhile, the escaped XRN arrives at a warehouse where she upgrades her body to a higher quality model. At that moment, the building's owner returns, sees XRN, and calls her by the name Danica. Soon after, the detectives are called to the warehouse. They provide medical assistance to the owner, and Dorian recognizes him as Dr. Nigel Vaughn, the founder of LumaCorp and the man who created him. After the XRN disaster, Vaughn lost his license, changed his name, and now makes a living repairing robots and selling old parts. He explains that Danica had demanded he take her to his old lab, which no longer exists. He feels a heavy sense of responsibility for the catastrophe he unleashed. Vaughn suggests he may be able to track Danica by accessing old equipment. Meanwhile, Danica storms into a technology company's lab, killing several employees. Back at the precinct, Rudy bows before the Great Master, confessing he's a huge fan, and helps Vaughn locate a crate containing synthetic souls, the essence that makes androids alive. Meanwhile, John is informed that Danica has stolen 500 enhanced ZNA processor cores. This means someone could potentially create 500 more copies of Danica. Nigel and Rudy manage to isolate Danica's unique energy signature and track her near a restaurant. Nigel gives John a spike with instructions to drive it into the back of Danica's neck. The detectives head to the restaurant where many influential people have gathered. However, Danica is already there and opens fire on the guests just as the police storm the building. Her weapon proves to be more powerful, and John hides behind a column for cover. While Danica is reloading, John manages to drive the spike into her neck, but it doesn't work. Back at the precinct, Sandra orders that Dr. Vaughn be brought in, but Nigel has already disappeared. After severely beating John, Danica continues onward until Dorian intervenes. In the ensuing fight, Dorian is impaled on a steel rod. As Danica prepares to shoot Dorian, John strikes her with a stick. Danica grabs him and strangles him before throwing him to the ground. Suddenly, John shows her a grenade pin and kicks her. Danica is thrown from the room and explodes behind the wall. John reports that the bot has been destroyed and learns that Dr. Vaughn is missing. Rudy then discovers that the synthetic souls are also gone. Meanwhile, Nigel retrieves the ZNA processors Danica hid for him in a dumpster and drives off in a van. The detectives suspect that Vaughn intends to create an army of Danicas. One day, a girl wanders through a forest, watching as shining mathematical equations fill the air around her. Elsewhere, another girl conducts an imaginary orchestra, hearing and seeing her beautiful music fill a concert hall. Suddenly, both girls collapse, their eyes opening into a lifeless stare. Sandra informs John about the simultaneous deaths of two students. Inspecting Scarlett's body, John contacts Valerie, who is examining the second victim, Eleanor. Toxicology tests come back clean, though visually the deaths appear to be overdoses. John finds a sealed container in Scarlett's pocket, its biometric lock responding to her DNA. Valerie finds an identical empty container on Eleanor. It turns out both girls were chromes, genetically modified humans. Sandra asks Valerie, herself a chrome, to talk to their parents. The lab discovers traces of a new type of substance in the victim's blood. Meanwhile, Dorian finds a third victim, another academy student named Lila, who drowned 7 months ago. The three girls were close friends. The detectives visit Lila's mother, Mrs. Hoving, who reveals that her daughter was not a chrome, but a natural girl. After Lila drowned, Mrs. Hoving hired a private investigator who managed to record Scarlett and Eleanor discussing the night of Lila's death. She handed the recordings over to the police, but was later told they were erased due to a magnetic surge. John doubts this explanation and asks for the detective's contact information. Meanwhile, Valerie speaks with Jessica, a classmate of the deceased girls and the second natural girl in their class. Jessica claims she never heard anything about drugs. Another classmate, Marshall, firmly states that no illegal substances exist at Mental Academy. Meanwhile, Dorian finds another container in Scarlett's room, protected with biosecurity measures, containing a single tablet. Analysis reveals that the drug is brand new. Its molecules are tagged with Scarlett's DNA, meaning it was custom-made for her. Rudy concludes that the tablet was printed on a pharmaceutical-grade chemical printer. Dorian tracks down a Chemulon 6 printer at a house near the academy. The owner is deceased, and his son, Julian, had been expelled from the academy the previous year. The printer's memory contains the DNA profiles of all three deceased girls. Julian greets the detectives at the door and explains that his father bought the printer to manufacture his own medications. The boy behaves strangely, and the police realize he has already taken the substance, which he calls Vero. Julian insists someone hacked the printer to kill Scarlett and Eleanor and claims Lila's death was unrelated. He is taken into custody. Meanwhile, Valerie uncovers messages between Scarlett and her father, in which he assures her that he took care of it. Later, the detectives visit Scarlett's father, who confirms that all three girls were together the night Lila drowned after taking the substance. Harvey decided to cover it up to protect his daughter's reputation and paid off the private investigator to make the evidence disappear, a betrayal his honest daughter never forgave him for. Meanwhile, Lila's mother had been threatening the girls. Meanwhile, another container with biometric locking is found in Julian's room, containing a flash drive with encrypted images. The detectives suspect that Mrs. Hoving blackmailed Julian into overdosing the two girls, prompting him to finally tell them the truth. It turns out Lila's mother had pressured her relentlessly to succeed. Julian loved Lila for who she was and plays her final message, where she admits that after taking Vero, she realized how limited she truly was and that she would never be good enough. Then she walks into the water and vanishes. Later, they play the recording for Mrs. Hoving. She confesses to hiring a hacker to kill Scarlett and Eleanor. When their parents destroyed the evidence and robbed her of justice, she was consumed with rage and wanted them to feel the pain she had endured. John realizes how dangerous obsession can become. Meanwhile, Michael and Linda Bennett recall how, a year earlier, a teenager named Aaron Cassidy broke into their home and was shot dead by their smart home security system, which manifested as a holographic butler named Sam. Trying to clear her head, Linda goes for a swim. Michael watches a news report about Aaron's death and orders Sam to turn it off, but the hologram doesn't respond. At the same time, the pool cover closes, trapping Linda underwater. Michael is forced to break down the door to get to her. The security system identifies him as a threat and guns him down. The detectives respond to the scene. Learning about the anniversary, they classify the case as murder, since Aaron's death had been a highly publicized event. Dorian confirms that the smart home system was hacked. Sam offers to provide the detectives with a security log showing numerous threats received by the Bennetts over the past year. The partners visit Centurion, the company that manufactures smart home security systems. The company's director, Kay, suspects the hacker group Disrupt is responsible, citing the many threats and cyber attacks they faced after Aaron's death. Meanwhile, Valerie interviews Aaron's mother. She believes smart homes should be outlawed, but doesn't know why her son ended up in the Bennett's house. That night, the city's lights go out, and images of Aaron, along with demands for justice, are projected on the buildings. The group Disrupt claims responsibility for the blackout. Centurion is pressured to disable all smart home systems. Investigators suspect the hacker known as Chris Pinks is involved. Rudy, who was once a famous hacker himself, recognizes that Chris Pinks will be attending an exclusive party which the police can infiltrate using Rudy's old alias, Apid. The detectives attend the party, which turns out to be virtual, and locate Chris Pinks, arresting him. Chris Pinks explains that he hacked the city network as an act of civil disobedience, but denies any involvement in the murders. Their conversation is interrupted by news of another death, the Centurion Company's attorney, who suffocated when the fire suppression system in his smart home removed all the oxygen. It turns out he had also received threat letters like the Bennetts. Judging by the outdoor photograph of Aaron used in the blackouts, it's clear the sender personally knew him. Valerie finds half of a revealing photo on Aaron's computer and asks Chris Pinks to locate the missing half and extract a hidden social media tag from the file. Chris Pinks succeeds. The second half shows a teenage girl, whom Dorian identifies as Emily Wilson, a student expelled for assaulting a classmate. After Aaron's death, she moved to Arizona and disappeared last month. Her files contain detailed dossiers on the Bennetts, the attorney, and the director of Centurion. The detectives head to the company, where Kay is working late. Suddenly, Kay receives a threatening email identical to the previous ones. John calls her and tells her to lock down the building and wait for them. However, Emily has already hacked into Centurion's system and is rewriting all the codes. When the police arrive, Emily has full control and uses the Sam android to hunt Kay. Chris Pinks manages to unlock the main door and disable Sam, but Emily then activates all the Sam units in the fire suppression system. The people inside have only 5 minutes before the oxygen is depleted. Dorian locates Emily, but is forced into a fight with one of the Sam androids while other robots advance on John's position. Chris Pinks projects multiple holograms of John to confuse the attacking androids, giving John time to destroy the Sams and rescue Kay. Meanwhile, Dorian defeats his opponent and confronts Emily. While Chris Pinks shuts down the fire suppression system, Emily confesses that Aaron was on his way to her house and had cut through the Bennett's yard. Aaron's mother learns that her son was helping troubled teens selflessly, saving many lives. One day, a man is playing holographic golf in his apartment when he is attacked by a hooded man with a bandaged face who injects a syringe into his neck. The victim's face distorts momentarily, and the syringe is filled with a mysterious fluid. The next morning, the detectives learn of a possible murder. The victim, Brian Barrow, was a genetically enhanced human, incapable of dying from cardiac arrest under normal circumstances. Dorian finds an injection mark and discovers DNA from 7 different people on Barrow's body. The team learns that all 7 had died of natural causes, but since they were ordinary humans, their deaths had not raised suspicion. Sandra notes a pattern. All the victims were physically attractive. Meanwhile, the hooded attacker visits an underground doctor, handing over the vial taken from Barrow. The doctor connects the vial to a device, administers an injection, and activates the machine. The man's mutilated face convulses in pain. Later, the police discover that Barrow was a regular at a Chrome-exclusive club. Valerie visits and meets the club's owner, who agrees to hand over surveillance footage. Meanwhile, Rudy confirms that nanobots had been injected into each of the victims. Nanobots designed for cosmetic surgery. The killer had been using them to steal facial features from people. The detectives visit a plastic surgeon who had once experimented with facial reconstruction using nanobots. He shows them a device, an activator, used to inject nanobots into a donor. Once the nanobots collect the required genetic material, they are extracted and re-injected into a recipient. However, the experiment was shut down after donors began dying from arrhythmias. In the illegal clinic, however, the experiment succeeds, and the killer, identified as Eric, demands the doctor continue repairing his face, damaged during the initial trials. The doctor is forced to inject Eric with adrenaline to strengthen him. This time, Eric is rewarded with emerald green eyes stolen from a female shop assistant. After her body is discovered, it becomes clear that Eric has accelerated his process. The detectives head to Chinatown, where John questions a large woman about a man named DiCarlo. When she denies knowing him, John knocks her over. Suddenly, her back splits open, revealing a small man, the real DiCarlo, hidden inside an exosuit. Angry about the damage to his beloved exosuit, DiCarlo nonetheless provides information about the underground plastic surgeon. When the police storm the surgeon's office, the doctor injects himself with adrenaline. He viciously attacks John but collapses and dies from cardiac arrest. John finds Eric's reconstructed face in the doctor's computer. Dorian identifies 10 specific traits Eric is seeking and calculates his next target. However, when the detectives storm the potential victim's house, Eric spots them from outside and aborts the attempt. The team tries to figure out how Eric selects his victims. They realize all the targets live in the same district and recently updated their 3D driver's license photos. Reviewing DMV employee records, Valerie identifies Eric Latham, who took a disability leave when the experiments began. Meanwhile, Eric watches a woman in a neighboring building through his window. He sends her an online message, promising that he will soon come meet her in person. The man leaves his house, so when the detectives arrive, they find only the computer correspondence. Through it, they identify the woman for whom Eric had been perfecting his face. Eric arrives at the woman's home and discovers that she is blind. She tells him she doesn't care what he looks like. She's simply happy that they found each other. Eric kisses her and cries. Their conversation is interrupted by the police. Eric flees. John catches up with him on the rooftop and tries to persuade him not to jump, but Eric throws himself down, punishing himself for the deaths of innocent people. Sometime later, a man in a wheelchair approaches a teenage girl, offering to take her to a shelter. After receiving food supplement tablets from a dispenser, she accepts his offer. The man gently scratches her hand as he takes it. The girl loses consciousness, and he carries her away in his van. Meanwhile, the precinct hosts the annual review of android officers. Everyone unanimously praises Dorian. After receiving a call, the partners head to the scene where a girl's body stuffed with straw has been found. John realizes it's a copycat crime mimicking the Straw Man murders from 10 years ago. John's father, Detective Edward Kennex, had caught the original killer, Michael Costa, and sentenced him to life imprisonment. However, shortly afterward, Edward died. John tries to obtain his father's case file, but finds it classified. All that's known is that Edward had been under investigation for stealing equipment from the evidence storage before his death. The detectives visit Costa in prison. The warden describes him as a model inmate. Costa, whose paranoid schizophrenia is now controlled, claims he was innocent and admits that Edward had visited him shortly before his death. Later, it's discovered that the stitches on the new victim's body match the stitching on the previous strawman victims. Either the copycat had close contact with Costa, or it's the same killer. Sandra helps John access his father's sealed file, where he learns that Edward had suspected Costa was framed. John also finds photographs of the victims' feet, all circled. Meanwhile, Rudy examines the new victims and notices there is no dirt under their fingernails, suggesting these are copies, not real bodies. John recalls the photos of the feet, and Rudy confirms that all victims had flat feet. Using an old organic printer and a cupcake mold, Rudy demonstrates how the material settles, creating a flat bottom. Modern bioprinters have corrected this flaw, but old models couldn't preserve an arch, explaining why the bodies were stuffed with straw. It turns out the kidnapper wants to keep the real victims alive, but ensures no one looks for them. Soon, another body is found. John determines that all the victims had lived in large shelters, equipped with food supplement dispensers that prick fingers to assess nutritional needs. Sandra orders officers in uniform to patrol all shelters openly, except for 2 where undercover ambushes are set. That evening, a detective shelters in one of the safe houses and meets a guy wearing night vision goggles. Meanwhile, John tells Dorian about how his father almost died because he refused a bribe from a corrupt captain, suggesting that the case against Edward had been fabricated. Meanwhile, the officer finds the discarded night vision goggles by the roadside. He spots a van leaving and calls for backup. The suspect is identified as Glenn Dunbar, previously convicted for black market tech trafficking. The partners arrive at the scene and discover that the boy is still alive, trapped in the back of the van. Inside the building, they find capsules with the bodies of young women connected to unknown technologies. Dorian captures Glenn's double, packed with explosives, while John is attacked by the real Glenn. John manages to shoot and kill him. Examining Glenn's body, they discover he was a cyborg, his body fused with biotech. Nearby, they find a bioprinter, the same model once stolen from the evidence locker. Dorian discovers that the officer in charge of the evidence locker back then, Grant, was also murdered just 3 weeks after Edward's death. It turned out that Glenn suffered from a degenerative disease, which he had tried to fight through cybernetics, experimenting on his victims. When, 10 years later, the technology began to fail, he resumed kidnapping people. Grant had been selling stolen equipment and tried to frame Edward for the theft to discredit his investigation, and apparently Glenn had killed them both. All charges against Costa are dropped, and Sandra congratulates John on closing his father's case and restoring his good name. Meanwhile, Dorian is informed that his operational term has been extended, thanks to glowing reviews, especially from his partner. The emotional android finds John at a bar and gifts him a brand new synthetic leg, a model not yet available on the market. John is deeply moved by the gesture, but just then the dispatcher calls in a new case, and the partners head out on their next assignment.